Well, we've got a Haason Reddick update with both sides naming their number, and there's a reason that's a really good thing. Plus, Peter King retired but left a few doubts for Philly on his way out, while Howie Roseman isn't hiding his interest in Jeremiah Trotter Jr. But would he be a good fit in Vic Fangio's defense? Let's talk about it. But first, let's run it. Alright, first off, I know a lot of you guys were messaging me about a scammer posing as my account, and I appreciate the heads up. I've reported it should have been dealt with, but I hope it didn't get into you guys. Now, one person did not get taken advantage of in tight end Albert Okwuegbunam, after the Eagles already re-signed him to a one-year deal worth $1.3 million. Yet the most notable number we can now report is he got $750,000 guaranteed. Not bad for a dude who played 57 total offensive snaps, logging 1 target. However, SI.com says new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore sees potential in Big Alberto, with an emphasis being put on helping refine technique and route running concepts, so maybe we see him contribute. Although not gonna lie, I don't feel great about Alberto's chances of doing that. Sure, I hope he proves me wrong. And I hope NBC's Peter King is proven wrong, after saying he doesn't have a good feeling about the Eagles in 2024, and that there's another issue in his mind as well.
You have to ask yourself a legitimate question about A.J. Brown. I think it's really, really important question about A.J. Brown. Okay, you saw that he had this incredible 6-game run of 125 yards receiving or more. And then in the last, whatever it was, 9 games of the season, he didn't have a single game with 125 yards receiving. And you have to ask yourself, okay, was there any injury involved in that? Not really that we know of in a major way. Was there some friction between him and his quarterback, friction between him and the head coach? But that absolutely unequivocally has to get solved. You don't pay a guy what they're paying A.J. Brown and expect him to be the best receiver in the NFL on November 1st.
Yeah.
And then to be nothing, in essence, he had a couple of decent games, but to be nothing for the last 9-10 weeks of the season. That cannot happen. There's all these things that happen that one by one the Eagles have to get to the bottom of and fix, or else this is going to be a disastrous year.
By the way, King announced his retirement today, and I wish him well and a wonderful future and relaxation and everything else, but I wholeheartedly disagree with his A.J. Brown take.
Well, agree to disagree.
Oh yeah, and he also said if Philly's going to prove him wrong, that Jalen's going to need to take the reins and lead. Which, fine, I can kind of get behind that. Hurts needs to be better. And he's got to limit the turnovers, especially with 20 turnovers in 17 games last season. However, I fully believe in Jalen. Now, is this a season for him to prove last year was a fluke and get back on track to the MVP level? Sure. But again, like we saw, he was a top MVP candidate in November. It's just that the offense didn't put him in the spots to be successful. Whereas the turnover of coaching staff this time is going to add several new wrinkles and allow him to take the next step. So at plus 1,600 odds for Jalen to win MVP, it's at least worth taking a flyer on. Okay, but speaking of changing on the staff, the Eagles lost another member, this time their Director of Performance Nutrition and Assistant Strengths and Conditioning Coach Mike Minnis, as he's headed to Indy to join Shane Steichen. I don't know if that's a significant loss or not, but I think no. In fact, maybe it's a good thing if he was the one in charge of Jordan Davis's conditioning work, and not really being able to move the same way towards the end of the season. Anyway, another member who landed on their feet after getting fired was Sean Desai, with the Rams hiring the Birds' former DC in a senior assistant position. And while it's notable that both he and Brian Johnson didn't get coordinator positions, I still think Desai has a good mind for the game, just maybe not connecting with the players and relating in a coordinator position, considering the reports of players eventually refusing to talk to him. Even still, I wish him the best of luck, just obviously not whenever he's playing us.
May God guide you in your quest.
Well, hopefully that quest of getting Haason Reddick works out too, which seems more likely after Victor Williams of the Liberty Line reported the Eagles are willing to give a big money extension to Haason Reddick, and apparently that's upwards of $22 million per year. Now, I know several of you were asking if the Eagles officially offered Haason, and I haven't seen any reports on that, but it is worth mentioning that Reddick's camp is holding firm to the $25 million target that had originally been thrown out there when all this speculation started. And realistically, that's good news, because again, like I've been talking about, given the increase in the cap, $25 million today is essentially like $22 million just a few days ago. And remember, Reddick never requested a trade and said he wants to stay in Philly. So I think we could be coming closer to an agreement. Granted, yes, that's if this report is true. However, we're about to see massive contracts in a few weeks because a 14% bump in the NFL salary cap isn't nothing. Like PFN's Anthony DeBona reminded, remember the wild free agency in the NBA back in 2016 when everyone was getting paid? Yeah, like Timothy Mozgov got 65, Alan Crabb got 75, and Luol Deng got 72. Get ready for that in the NFL. Alright, what do y'all think about all this? I mean, seriously, the numbers between Howie and Haason Reddick's camp, if those are accurate, are not that far off. Also, if you haven't checked out my latest video with Anthony previewing the players to keep an eye on at the Combine, feel free to give it a look. But for those that have, you know that I didn't really talk about Jeremiah Trotter Jr. much because I plan to do that on a future video, which honestly, kind of perfect timing because the Eagles have a formal meeting scheduled with the Clemson linebacker at the Combine. This coming after the Birds already have a top 30 visit scheduled in Philly with Oklahoma's Tyler Guyton after the Combine. Now, obviously, a lot of y'all know that he's not my first choice for linebacker in the draft, with that going to A&M's Edgerrin Cooper, yet I don't think there's any denying JTJ's got plenty of upside. Like the Inquirer's Devin Jackson pointed out, Trotter has really good run-stopping ability, possessing a quick trigger on run plays and an impressive ability to be physical with interior linemen when deconstructing blocks. While also sharing, and I think most of us would agree when watching film, that the Clemson Star's greatest strength is his play recognition. At the same time, he did miss 15 tackles, so occasionally that aggressiveness can cost him. But personally, I can live with that because watching him, it doesn't really feel like that's a glaring weakness. And he also presents a great ability on the blitz, racking up 28 pressures and 5.5 sacks on just 102 pass rush reps in 2023, which was good enough for a 27.5 pressure rate and a 5.4% sack rate. Again, another really impressive number and something to like about 54. However, it's the coverage spot that leaves some questions, because he does seem to have good play recognition and can be in the right spot at times, especially in more of a zone look. I mean, heck, the dude had 4 interceptions over his last 2 seasons with 2 returned for scores. But like Jackson pointed out, it's when Trotter gets isolated that can get him into trouble, whether that's in the flat and outside the numbers or having his vertical range tested over the middle of the field. So what do y'all think? Should the Eagles consider drafting him? Like, honestly, I know this may receive a bit of hate, but I feel like I'd have to say no at this point, depending on who's available. I'm sorry, it's just that mainly because Fangio's scheme doesn't feel like it fits Trotter well enough. Plus, we'd basically be adding another Nakobe Dean. Probably a little better than Nakobe, but strength-wise and size-wise, they're very similar. Which is why I might even put North Carolina's Cedric Gray ahead of him, simply due to Gray's better coverage skills, whether that's in zone or covering backs out of the backfield. Granted, he's not as good of a tackler who can over-pursue and can sometimes struggle to shed blocks. But if you're looking to complement Dean, since it feels like Howie Roseman is sold on the idea of Nakobe getting the green dot, then I'd probably lean in that direction. Plus, Gray was the leading tackler at the Senior Bowl and was listed as one of the couple players who significantly helped his draft stock there. So I'm going to be really curious to see how he does at the Combine, but I'd expect him to do fairly well because just watching the tape, this dude's an athlete. But my personal favorite option, and it's even really close with Edgerrin Cooper, is Michigan's Junior Colson. Because this dude is 6'3", 247 pounds with really good instincts, twitch, and pursuit angles. With one NFL scout saying he's a high-level coverage linebacker with the downhill trigger to make an impact immediately at the NFL level. Yeah, sounds exactly like what the Birds need, quite honestly. Of course, he didn't register a single sack, forced fumble, recovery, or interception last season, so you could question his production, as well as some other scouts also saying he can struggle shedding blocks at times, but the range is very visible on tape, and I think he'd pair really nicely with Dean. I don't know, what do y'all think? Okay, let me just say, I love all the feedback and appreciate all the comments. I try to read as many as I can, but I'm curious, which players should I break down next or positional groups for the Eagles to be interested in? Also, by the way, just a heads up, but Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman will be speaking for the first time since the reports about Big Dom controlling Sirianni at 1:30 today. And I just can't wait to see what that turns into. Anyway, thank you guys because we just passed 47,000 subs. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you on the next one. This has been the Philly Special.